Dear 30-somethings, today it's all about you. Because by now I'm sure you feel like you have life figured out and you're officially an adult because, well, no one can tell you what to do or who to be anymore. But here's the thing, if you felt like your 20s were all about people judging you for not having achieved enough or not having grown up fast enough, then you might feel like your 30s are all about people judging you for not doing anything right. So if you've just entered your 30s, or maybe you're closer to 40 and you still don't feel like your life is on track because people keep telling you you're doing it wrong, then take a seat, because I want to share some musings from that period of my own life that might actually help you out now. Society told me, as I'm sure it's telling you now, that by the time I turned 30 or was in my early 30s at the latest, I had to have the husband, the house with the white picket fence, the 2.4 kids and the dog, plus an amazing career where I was climbing the ladder like it was an Everest expedition, and I would have this fistful of dollars that I'd invested wisely for my future. What actually happened was I entered my 30s having tried to start my career over by going back to study, because I had worked mostly office admin and service jobs during my 20s, pretty much to fund my travels, but neither of those were realistically going to take me in the direction that I wanted to go. I graduated right around the time the global financial crisis hit, which meant no one was hiring. There was a massive hiring freeze across a ton of corporate industry. And I had to take jobs I didn't really like or want simply to make ends meet, and I had very little else to my name. So there I was. No husband, no house, no kids, no dog, no stocks, bonds, or little bags of plutonium, and definitely no career to speak of. What I did have was a lot more debt and a heavier reliance on my family than I ever imagined I would need as an independent adult. And to pour salt on the wounds, all of my friends had at least one of those things, and I felt like a complete and absolute loser. And yes, I was judged for my choices, but also for the many, many things that were simply out of my control. I don't know why family, friends, colleagues, strangers on the internet think it's okay to ask these passive-aggressive, invasive questions about someone else's private life, and then take the liberties to judge them really harshly when they don't actually like the answer. You know, if you read between the lines, people will often ask, "What's wrong with you?" and mask it as some polite conversation or concern. And you know you can't win no matter what you do. If you're happily single, they'll ask, "When are you going to meet someone?" If you're married without kids, they'll ask, "Well, when are you going to start trying?" If you have kids, you're raising them wrong. If you're doing really well at work, well, when's your next promotion? And if you're lucky enough to have bought a house, well, it's the wrong size, it's in the wrong suburb, it has too much work to be done on it. And how on earth are you going to afford it since you wasted all your money on that avocado toast? Like, every small minutiae of your life is underneath a microscope for others to dissect and judge and criticize. And I find it interesting that people take real offense when you don't answer their silly questions calmly and honestly with a smile on your face, like you are totally okay with how your life's turned out because it was how you planned it all along anyway. Why does your timeline have to look like everyone else's? And why are you made to feel so bad when it doesn't? I find it such an outdated idea that we all have to follow along the same playbook anyway. The relationship, the dream job, the house, the perfect family, they were all built for a world that doesn't actually exist anymore. But we are still so conditioned to think that there is something fundamentally wrong with people who don't have what we had by the age that we had it, even through no fault or choice of their own. Yet we still squarely place the blame on them anyway through these excuses of, oh, well, they were too picky or too selfish or too gullible to make the decisions that we made when we were their age back in the good old days. And you know what? Here's something I learned in my 30s, and by supporting close friends of mine going through similar experiences. Most people who judge you are only trying to validate their own choices or project their fears onto you over what might have happened to them if they'd chosen the road less travelled, or their fears of missing out on the same experiences as their friends. And I get that there is a real and present concern about being rejected and ostracised, of deviating too far from the path and losing friends, but forcing yourself into a life that doesn't quite fit, it's not going to make you happy either. And their problems specifically with you? Well, that's not your cross to bear. You don't owe anyone a picture-perfect life, particularly when it's not your picture. You know, we're not all living on this 1950s billboard chasing the same old cookie-cutter dream. So what do I do about it, I hear you ask? And that is a great question. You know, your 30s are such an exciting time because it's your decade of discovery. The checklist version of adulthood isn't necessarily wrong, it's just not universal. And right now you get to choose which of the partner, the house, the job, the kids matters the most to you. For me, my 30s were about finding out that my value wasn't tied to milestones or motherhood. I was no less worthy than the people who bought a house or got married before I did, or who had a better job or chose to have kids. I simply allowed myself to be uncertain. I allowed myself to question everything, and I allowed myself to start over as many times as I needed in order to define my own worth. There will be struggles and obstacles, and life will seem very unfair regardless of whether you follow the script or take the unconventional path, because your 30s aren't about having life figured out. It's about asking yourself, what do I actually want over what was I told to want? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't let the bastards grind you down. People will always judge you and try and make you feel bad about the choices that you've made, even when you have everything that you want and need already. So perhaps it is time to start filtering out those toxic relationships that are holding you back. And keep those people close who are good and kind and supportive and who will motivate you and push you forward even when life gets crazy, because it will. And make the best choices for you given the information that you have, and remember that ultimately, the only opinion that matters is yours.